Next we've got pocket fours in the small blind. The straddle's on. Our old buddy Paul raises to 300 from middle position. It's always fun to get involved in pots against him. I call. We're heads up, out of position. The flop comes king 4 deuce rainbow. We've got our first set of the day. I check to induce a bet. He doesn't bite. He checks back. The turn is another king. We improve to a full house. There will be no more free cards. I bet 400. If the opponent has a middle to high pocket pair below a king, he should actually like the second king coming out because it reduces the amount of kings that I'll have. The opponent calls. The river is the 10 of spades. It's a little scary because the opponent could have pocket 10s, but we can't be too worried about that. I've shown plenty of bluffs today, including the one with 7 deuce earlier against Paul. I go with a large sizing of 1700. It should get paid off lighter because my credibility is lower than Amber Heard's. We get some good news from the other side of the table. A vote. Our big bet gets paid off. The opponent shows that he got there on the river with a pair of 10s. I was having a hard time figuring out how he called the turn bet with just a 10 in his hand. Then later, he'd say that he was playing the Brunson, which ended up costing him a couple thousand. The very next hand, we've got ace king of diamonds in the hijack. The player in middle position raises to 300. I 3-bet to 1,000. Paul's in the small blind. He's got chips that he'd like to play with. He puts in the cold 4-bet to 3,400. After playing with Paul for a while, it's tough to believe that he's ever going to have anything, but occasionally these types of players will show up with monsters. The middle position player folds. It's on us. Do we really want to 5-bet and possibly get this in for over 20,000? The types of hands Paul will show up with are hands we're completely crushing, like ace queen, ace 5 suited, ace 4 suited, and 7 deuce. We'll have some hands that have us in terrible shape, like aces and kings. We already ran into aces once in a similar spot. Paul will have ace king as well, plus queens and jacks too. If we 5-bet, we'll fold out all of his hands that we're crushing and he'll either call or jam with hands that we're flipping with, or they have us crushed. There's no real benefit of 5-betting when we have the luxury of playing in position. I call to see a flop. It's already a big pot. Let's see all diamonds at one time, or at least ace high. The flop comes 8-4-4 rainbow. We don't connect at all other than having the backdoor flush draw. The small blind significantly down bets to 1,500. It's about 1/5 pot. Since we have removal to aces and kings, it's more likely that Paul has the same hand as us and doesn't want to make this pot too big. I don't want it to get too big either. I'm okay with the price. I call, looking for a high card or a diamond. The turn is the deuce of clubs. It's the exact opposite of what I was hoping to see. Now we don't even beat 7 deuce. At least the small blind checks. I'm okay playing nice and trying to get the showdown. I check back. The river is another deuce. This is even worse because now we're chopping with all ace highs, including ace queen and ace 5 suited that we were beating on the flop and turn. Paul's done checking. He goes with a big sizing and bets 7,600. Well, there's a good chance he's doing this to get me off of a chop. You never want to call knowing that the best outcome will result in splitting the pot. I'd be calling 7,600 to win 5,000 back at best, or I'd be torching another 7,600 if he's playing a hand like aces, kings, or queens in a tricky way. 7 deuce also improved to a full house, which Paul could have taken this line with. I'll have better hands that I'll play this way and can call to win the entire pot, like queens, jacks, and 10s. It's an annoying situation, but I'm handcuffed.
I feel like we have the same hand. Or you have 7 deuce. Okay. You were messing.
Right? Yeah, they built the brand. I had the 7 deuce.
Yeah. Almost called.
Paul shows that he has the guts to go for it in order to get me off of a chop, as he reveals ace king of spades. He's rewarded for going with his intuition, and he wins an extra several thousand from me. An hour later, we pick up pocket 10s on the button. The straddle's on. I raise to 300. Matt Moore is in the small blind. He's not supposed to be calling. He's supposed to be 3-betting a narrow range or folding. Matt 3-bets at 1,200. We're close to the top of our range with a hand that we're totally fine playing a 3-bet pot with in position. I call for 900 more. We're heads up. The flop comes 8-7-5 with 2 diamonds. We've got an overpair with some backdoor draws. Matt down bets at 900. He could be doing this with overpairs, flush draws, and some trash hands like 2 overs that'll still have equity against us. I'll have all the sets on this board and even 6-4 suited sometimes. I'd like to take control of this pot and clear out Matt's hands containing overcards because that's what I suspect that he's most likely to have. I raise to 2,500. Matt will often fold and we can win this right now. If not, we still have potential to improve. Matt has other ideas. He calls. I don't think that he has a high card hand anymore unless he has a flush draw to go along with it. It's a lot more likely that he'll have an overpair to the board, like aces down to 9s. The turn is the ace of clubs, reducing the amount of pocket ace combos that he'll have. He checks. If Matt has kings, queens, jacks, 10s, or 9s, he won't like this card at all. I'm concerned that we don't have the best hand, and if we check, we'll look weak because we sorta are, then we won't be able to credibly rep a strong hand on the river. I'm not good at giving up. I bet 3,500, leaving myself with 6,600 behind that I may have to jam with on the next street. I'm really just targeting kings, queens, and jacks. These particular pocket pairs will be in a very uncomfortable spot, but it's not that large of a sizing, so Matt still may feel inclined to call. Matt calls. He could have a few ace-x of diamonds combinations. There aren't that many of those though. I don't think that he'll have aces anymore because he probably would have jammed turn even if he had the ace of diamonds, because I don't have that much behind and there are a lot of scary river cards. I put Matt on one pair at best, potentially with a diamond draw, and pretty often he'll have a second pair type of hand that's slightly better than ours. The river is the 9 of spades, putting 4 to the straight on board. Matt checks. He won't like seeing this card because we'll have more straights than he will, plus we have the blocker to jack 10 of diamonds. I've definitely played this in an unorthodox way, but given the run out, there aren't that many strong hands that Matt could have anymore. Even if he made it this far with ace king of diamonds or ace king with only 1 diamond, he's not going to love seeing a jam. He'll have to fold top a decent amount of the time because there are so few bluffs that I'd play this way. If he has kings, queens, or jacks, he'll have to fold to a shove as well. I announced that I'm all in to represent straights like ace-6, king-6, 8-6, and 6-4 suited. I'm also representing sets like 9s, 8s, 7s, and 5s. There are actually a good amount of strong hands that I could have played similarly, not that many that Matt can call with. Matt folds without thinking too much about it. We get a huge bluff through. I wouldn't recommend anyone attempt to do anything similar. I took a strange line that luckily worked out to win a big pot. I talk about how friendly this game is, particularly considering the stakes, but I text Matt later about what he had in this one so I could share it with you guys. It's generally frowned upon to ask for this type of information, and most poker players don't want to talk about hands that they lost or were potentially bluffed out of, but Matt's nice enough to let us know that he had ace-4 of spades. We actually did outflop him, and even though we raised in an attempt to deny equity, Matt got there on us anyway, but our assessment was correct on the river that he wouldn't have better than 1 pair very often given how it was played, and our Hail Mary bluff works out. We're back over the 20k mark to make getting even within reach. We've got ace-king offsuit in the big blind. Paul raises to 300 from under the gun +1. Ace-king has caused us to lose a lot of money overall today, but we've got to have faith in it. 3-bet to 1200. Paul is ready to go another round. He's gotten the best of me so far. He calls for 900 more. We're heads up, out of position. The flop comes queen 10 deuce rainbow. We've got 2 overs and a gutter on a board that isn't too bad for our range. I continue with the bet at 1600. Under the gun +1 gets chips out quickly to call. The turn is the king of clubs, giving us top pair. Now we want to make sure that we get to showdown. I check. The opponent could have some straights, 2 pair combos, and maybe even some sets. He bets 2800. We aren't going to be letting go of top. I call, but this isn't a comfortable position. We don't want to face too much more pressure on the river if we don't improve. The dealer puts out the 7 of spades. I check with plans of calling any reasonably sized bet. The opponent goes with a sizing that's bigger than the pot. He bets 12,000. While I know Paul is more than capable of bluffing, I'm not sure this is a spot that we need to take to keep him honest. There are a number of ways that we could be beat. 1 pair isn't all that great of a hand when the pots are getting massive in cash games.
Alright, dude. You win. For the vlog! Bam! The dirty or the clean diaper, baby!
Paul's been trying so hard to give us his money, but I just won't accept it. He goes out of his way to bluff me with 3 deuce suited. It's definitely not what I was expecting. I keep telling myself I'm going to catch him at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. In this one, we've got 10-9 suited in the cutoff. I raised to 300. I'm getting tired, but I felt like I've had an edge in the game. I just need to make a big hand so I can finally catch Paul bluffing. So far, he's picked his spots well and put me to tough decisions. Paul calls in the small blind. The under the gun straddler calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes 10-9-7 rainbow. We've got top 2 pair on a very coordinated board. Checks to me. We're going to be betting for value. I make it 400. Paul may have lost every marble in his collection. He puts in the check raise to 1400. Of course he does. Paul has had quite the session. He was stuck 30,000 early on. Then he got out of the hole to be up 20,000, but he's down a little from the high point. He certainly plays a high variance style of poker that makes the game exciting, but it's also frustrating at times when he's making hands against you or gets you to fold the best one. Under the gun +1 folds. Against certain players, I may not necessarily re-raise, but Paul has been battling with us all day. We haven't had too much to really fight back with. We finally have an opportunity to force him to make a tough decision. I re-raised to 5,000 with the flagship that we acquired from him in the previous hand that we went over. Paul isn't scared of a little re-raise. He calls for 3,600 more. Maybe he already has a straight, and I'm falling into a trap that he's setting. The turn is the 5 of hearts. It doesn't change much. No new straights get there. Paul checks. I should be betting, but I'm concerned that Paul could have us beat somehow. I check back to keep the pot smaller if we're behind, and to allow Paul an opportunity to bluff the river if he doesn't have much. The dealer puts out another 5, pairing the board. Paul checks one last time. If he had a straight draw or a combo draw like 8-7 that he check-raised us with on the flop, he can't really call a bet. Maybe we can get value out of Jack-10 or Ace-10 that might have check-raised us and then called our re-raise, but he's such a wild card. I don't want to bet, get jammed on, and have to fold 10-9. There's already a 5-figure pot, and it's not impossible that we're beat by a straight, full house, or somehow miraculously trip 5s. I check back. Paul says that we win. I show top 2 pair. He'd later tell me that he had a king-jack for double gutter on the flop. I'm glad that we faded the queen at 8. It's been an incredibly long day, but I've been enjoying it. With this win, for the first time in almost 10 hours of playing this session, we're finally unstuck. It's been a marathon. We pick up pocket deuces in the cutoff. I raised to 300. When there are only 5 of us at this table, each player has to fight extra hard for pots to avoid getting run over. No one's been putting more effort in than Paul. He calls in the small blind. The under the gun straddler calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes 7-3 deuce rainbow. We've got bottom set on a board that won't typically be great for us. Checks to us. We're not slow playing anything. I bet 300. Guess what Paul does? I'll actually just let him tell you.
Let's make it 13, Brad. I want some of my money back.
Raising when your opponent has a set isn't a strategy that I often recommend to get your money back, but I'm eager to see how it works out for Paul. Under the gun folds. This is the best situation that I've been in all day. I don't want to let Paul have an opportunity to be let off the hook. I call to keep his bluffs in, which he tends to have at a higher than normal frequency for a human. The turn is the king of spades. It's beautiful. There's no new realistic hand that Paul will have that'll have taken the lead against us. He fires for 2,000. There's nothing to be afraid of. I'm enjoying this moment. I call again, hoping the opponent is going to blast away on the river like he has in some other hands. The dealer puts out the 6 of hearts. It's kind of the worst card in the deck, and it's still not that worrisome. Paul waves the white flag.
Alright, check, Brad. I give up.
Damn it, I really didn't want to hear that. I wanted him to go for another overbet. After he says that, it'll be tough to get him to call anything. It clearly sounds like he's weak. I go for the home run and bet 8,000 as if somehow I don't have much. I'm making one last attempt to steal this pot. Surprisingly, Paul doesn't fold right away. He must have something with at least a little showdown value. As he's still thinking about what to do, he lets us know what he's got.
All I have is a 7, Brad. He knows I'm calling too, so I thought we should let it go, right?
If Paul can level himself into calling, we'll turn a session that seemed to be doomed right from the start into a win of 13,000. It'd be a $30,000 swing from the low point. I can see Paul's having a tough time with his decision. He doesn't want to let it go, but after a full minute, he makes the fold. It would have been nice to have gotten paid there. It's hard for me to be bluffing in that spot though. We at least have a solid profit after a grueling session.